On a freezing night in the Ural Mountains, 9 hikers huddled in their tents, unaware that the serenity of the snow-covered wilderness would soon be shattered. By morning, their camp would lie abandoned, their fate sealed in one of history's most enduring mysteries. What happened that night to the Dyatlov group, and why did their journey end in such a puzzling tragedy? In February 1959, Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student with a passion for exploration, led a group of 8 friends and colleagues on a skiing and hiking expedition to the rugged and isolated Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. The group consisted of 7 men and 2 women, all experienced hikers eager to conquer Otorten, a mountain whose name ominously translates to "don't go there" in the local Mansi language. But for these skilled adventurers, the name was little more than a curiosity, a footnote in the lore of the region. The journey began on January 27, 1959, filled with camaraderie and optimism. Photographs recovered from the group's cameras show smiles, laughter, and the kind of energy that comes from chasing a shared goal. They had no idea that they would never reach Otorten, and that their story would become the subject of worldwide speculation for decades to come. On February 1st, the hikers reached a desolate area near the base of Kholat Shakal, which translates to Dead Mountain. The weather had turned harsh, with howling winds and heavy snow obscuring their visibility. Despite the conditions, the group decided to set up camp on the exposed slope rather than retreat to the safety of the forest below. Perhaps they intended to push themselves further, to test their skills against the mountain's challenges. Whatever their reasoning, it was here, on this barren slope, that their journey would take a sinister turn. When the hikers failed to return on their scheduled date, concern quickly grew among their families and friends. The Soviet government launched a search party on February 20th, sending rescuers into the remote wilderness. What they found shocked even the most seasoned searchers. The group's campsite was discovered abandoned, with their tent slashed open from the inside. Clothing and supplies were left behind in disarray, as if the hikers had fled in a frantic hurry. Footprints, some barefoot and others wearing only socks, led away from the camp into the deep snow, heading toward the forest. It was clear that something had caused the group to leave their shelter in a state of utter panic. The first bodies were found at the edge of the forest, near a makeshift fire under a large cedar tree. These hikers were barely dressed, wearing only undergarments, as though they had fled their tents in the middle of the night without time to gather their belongings. Nearby, branches on the tree were broken, suggesting someone had climbed it, perhaps in an attempt to spot the campsite or escape something lurking in the darkness. As the search continued, more bodies were discovered, some buried under snow and others scattered further into the wilderness. The condition of the hikers defied explanation. While some showed signs of hypothermia, others had sustained injuries that baffled investigators, severe fractures, internal injuries, and strange bruising. Yet there were no external wounds to explain the force needed to cause such damage. The medical examiner described the trauma as being akin to a car crash or an explosion. Adding to the mystery, traces of radiation were found on some of the hikers' clothing. This discovery led to speculation about military involvement, secret weapons tests, or exposure to a rare natural phenomenon. Despite extensive investigations, no conclusive evidence ever surfaced to explain the cause of the radiation. In the absence of clear answers, theories about what happened to the Dyatlov group have ranged from the scientific to the supernatural. Some suggest that an avalanche forced the hikers to flee their tents in terror. But this explanation doesn't account for the lack of debris, the injuries, or the strange state of their campsite. Others believe the hikers were victims of an infrasound phenomenon, where certain wind conditions can create low-frequency vibrations that induce feelings of panic and disorientation. More outlandish theories include encounters with extraterrestrial beings or secret Soviet military experiments. The remote location of the incident, combined with the era's Cold War secrecy, has only fueled speculation. Yet despite countless investigations, including a reinvestigation by Russian authorities in 2019, no definitive answers have been found. What if an entire village vanished overnight? No signs of struggle, no footprints leading away, only homes left for untouched, with kettles still steaming and toys scattered across the ground as if dropped mid-play. The silence that followed wasn't ordinary. It was heavy, unnatural, and deeply unsettling. Deep within the icy expanse of the Frost Vale Mountains, a secluded village called Draegenshollow had stood for centuries, untouched by the outside world. Its people were secretive, bound by ancient customs whispered from one generation to the next. Despite their isolation, the villagers were known for their resilience, surviving the harshest winters and the most brutal storms. But this winter was different. The snow fell heavier than ever, the winds carried a bone-deep chill, and an ominous quiet blanketed the region. Weeks passed without any sign of the villagers, no travelers, no messengers, not even a wisp of smoke rising from their chimneys. It was as if Draegenshollow had been swallowed by the mountains. Concerned, regional authorities sent a team of 5 experienced mountaineers, men and women hardened by years of survival in the most brutal conditions. But as skilled as they were, none of them were prepared for the horrors that awaited. The journey began uneventfully, but the closer the team got to the village, the more unsettling their surroundings became. The wind, usually sharp and relentless in the mountains, fell completely still. Not a single bird or animal stirred. The silence pressed in on them, growing heavier with each step, as though the mountains were holding their breath. As they climbed higher, snow crunched beneath their boots, and the air turned colder. Yet the wilderness around them seemed untouched by life. An unshakable sense of dread settled over the group. Marcus, the team leader, tried to focus on the path ahead, but even he couldn't ignore the unnatural stillness. By the time they reached Draegenshollow, unease had turned into a gnawing fear. What they found was deeply unsettling. The village was eerily intact, yet utterly lifeless. Doors swung gently in the wind, and curtains fluttered in open windows. Steam still rose from kettles left on stoves, as if the villagers had stepped away just moments before. There were no signs of struggle, no footprints in the fresh snow, and no indication of where the villagers had gone. "This doesn't make any sense," Sarah, the youngest of the group, whispered. Marcus tried to remain rational. "We'll take notes, document everything, and report back. There's got to be an explanation." But the others hesitated. Something about the empty streets and the ghostly quiet made it impossible to walk away. They needed answers. As the team began their investigation, the weather turned. A thick fog rolled in, unlike anything they'd seen before. It moved unnaturally, swallowing the village and reducing visibility to mere feet. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Then the whispers began. At first the sounds were faint, like leaves rustling in the wind. But as the night deepened, they grew louder, evolving into guttural murmurs. The voices seemed to come from every direction, echoing through the fog. In the heart of the village, they stumbled upon something strange. A massive stone obelisk. It stood tall and imposing, covered in strange symbols they couldn't decipher. Around its base were offerings, candles, fruit, and crudely carved wooden figures of people with hollow, eyeless faces. Sarah shivered despite her thick layers. Her compass, once steady, now spun wildly, and the group's radios emitted only static. Occasionally, the static was interrupted by faint, distorted cries for help. "We need to leave," Marcus said, his voice firm. But the whispers were growing louder, almost taunting, and their escape would not be easy. As the night dragged on, fear began to consume the team. When Henry, one of the strongest members, stepped outside to investigate a noise, he never returned. They found his flashlight lying near the village well, still warm to the touch. But Henry was gone. No footprints, no struggle, just emptiness. Panic gripped the group and things quickly unraveled. Anna vanished next. Her coat was found draped over a chair in one of the houses as if she had stepped out of it moments ago. Their desperate calls for her echoed unanswered through the fog. The once lifeless village now seemed alive, watching, waiting. Marcus remembered a chilling tale he'd once heard. Draegenshollow is protected. If disturbed, it demands tribute. Desperate for answers, they searched the village until they found a boarded-up house. Inside, they discovered a journal filled with frantic entries. The writings revealed a dark secret. Draegenshollow had made a pact with the mountain centuries ago. To survive the unforgiving winters, they offered a life as tribute every year. But if the pact was broken, the mountain would take everything. The realization hit them like a thunderclap. They were the offering this year. Determined to fight back, Marcus decided to destroy the obelisk, convinced it was the source of the curse. Ignoring Sarah's frantic pleas to stop, he swung his pickaxe with all his strength. The stone shattered with a deafening roar, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. But instead of breaking the curse, Marcus had unleashed it. The fog surged forward, swallowing the village and everyone in it. Sarah's screams echoed in his ears before everything went black. Days later, another search party arrived at Draegenshollow. They found the village untouched, silent as the grave. A new obelisk now stood in the square, its base adorned with two new hollow-eyed figures. The whispers still lingered on the wind, faint but persistent. And as the search party turned to leave, the whispers grew louder, calling out names, calling for more. If you want to listen a story of a lost girl who suddenly vanished, then click there